Thank you, Jake, for joining us for our second ever Elderly Instruments Living Room sessions.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I want to kind of start at the beginning. I feel like some people have recently gotten to know your music and your sound and what you stand for. And I want to take it back to the early days and what really got you where you are today. So tell me about the electric guitar.
Well, once upon a time, I was in a rock cover band called ADHD, because of course, because we were in middle school.
Perfect.
Uh, and yeah, we were like decent for a middle school rock band. We played in Battle of the Bands down in
Nice.
DC a fair bit. Had a good time. But yeah, I kind of got bored with it by like halfway through high school. I was just like, I don't really care about music anymore. I don't know what I'm doing. Um, and then my friend Rob sent me this one song called Barton Hollow by the Civil Wars.
Hmm.
And I proceeded to go like buy their album and learn every single thing on the album and like bought an acoustic guitar. And I was just sold. Um, and ran into this band a few months later called Megan Jean and the KFB, one of whom is now my vocal coach. And they that was the first time I'd ever seen a banjo played in person, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah, and he was playing clawhammer. And I went up after the show, and they were kind of the first independent musicians I'd ever met, like people who were doing it for a living but weren't, signing shirts at the VIP table or whatever. They were like just hanging out after their show in the bar.
Gotcha.
Or in this case, the Ethiopian restaurant. It was a strange pairing of band and venue. And
Strange, perfect.
exactly. So they told me all about, the life they were living as musicians. And Byrne, the banjo player, told me about the banjo coming from Africa and about the connection to our ancestors, which then made me want to learn more about it.
Hmm.
So I delved more deeply into it over the next couple years and wound up sort of gradually making the shift toward old time music, the more traditional stuff.
In your recent album, Spider Tales, uh, in for me was a spiritual album, and kind of connected those black roots to today for me. How does playing those songs compare to playing in your middle school band and not really caring about music? And it's interesting to hear you say that because I've never known you to not care about music. So, like that's a big difference. I'd like to know kind of how it feels to be singing, the songs you sing today, this, playing the music you're playing and educating the people in the way you do.
Yeah, I think compared to what I was doing back then, I don't think there was a focus for the music I was making when I was, in rock bands and playing, funk covers and whatever else it was. It was fun sometimes. There was good music made periodically, but like it didn't ever feel like it mattered
Mm.
to anything. And I feel like with those genres of music and those things that are really like focused on your individual creative capacity, it almost feels that way up until you start like you hit a big enough level where a lot of other people are invested in what you specifically are doing, right?
Fair. Yeah.
And I think now, because this music that I'm making is part of something that's bigger than me, whether anyone listens to it or not, um, it feels important just when I'm playing it by myself, because I'm part of a bigger picture and
Hmm.
something that's happening there. And I don't think that was the case before. So it's a big difference in terms of how I think about my work and um, the context that I feel I belong in while I'm making it.
Tell me more.
Well, I think. Well, one of our mutual friends, Jillian McCommon, said it really well when I spoke to her not long ago. She basically, and a bunch of the other people I spoke to for this research I was doing at the time, they spoke about feeling that there was this resonance that because they were doing something now that Black people had been doing hundreds of years ago, they were part of this chain of something that was tenacious and was durable in the way that we had to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that inherently there's something powerful about being part of that continuum, that you become part of the story of the people of the diaspora, as opposed to just, writing your own songs, which can be super gratifying. I'm not saying, that's also part of the tradition. Um, but I think it's a little bit different to me to be working in something that is that old.
Right.
And I think even should I start writing my own music in the future, I would hope that I would carry whatever I've done here into that.
Fair. Well, and I've heard you play things in a mixture of styles. Can you talk about how you're blending some of those lessons along the way into recreating old music, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think crucial to me is always the idea that none of these genres originally existed in their own little separate boxes the way we think of them existing now. And part of what I see as reclaiming the Black traditions of acoustic music in this country is also eliminating the genre categories that were imposed on those traditions, right? Blues and country and old time all originally existed in the same body of music and fed into one another, right? The difference between blues and gospel was not really musical, it was content. One was about your girlfriend and the other one's about God, as my professor Doc Woods always used to say. And I think what I was able to do on Spider Tales in a way that felt exciting to me was to take bluegrass and blues, early jazz, old time spirituals, throw them all into one pot and have it come out sounding cohesive, right?
Hmm.
I was able to put all these things in one place and it didn't sound disjointed, at least in my
No,
opinion, and
no,
according to the reviews I have read. Um, so that to me was my big takeaway that in choosing to voice the styles as I did, I was able to reclaim something that was maybe larger in scope than just the Black old time tradition or just like the Black history of bluegrass. That all of these things can be put back together the way they used to be intended to live.
intended. You're
That's
right.
what they were meant to exist as. And I
Hmm.
think putting the pieces back together and letting the traditions speak to one another again is going to be the focus of my work for some time.
I like that. um, so let's take it back to Hamilton College. Yeah,
Yep.
cool. That's where, correct me if I'm wrong, that's where you began the African American folk interest. And how did that come about? I would like to know.
Yeah, I guess the seed was planted before I actually got to college. I was actually in the house where I am now. This is my late grandparents' house up in Maine, where I've been hiding for like a month because it's a tough time to live in a small apartment.
I
And
understand.
I was upstairs in the attic, and the news came in that the grand jury was not indicting George Zimmerman for the killing of Trayvon Martin. And I just wound up, I in my head it was like such a cut and dry thing. I was like not expecting there to be controversy. I thought everyone was just going to be like, "Ah, oh, that's trash. What's wrong with people?" But then all these folks that I'd like grown up around, all of a sudden I realized like had a lot of conflicting opinions about like killing children in the street. And I was like, what do we do about that? What coping mechanisms do we have? And I
Yeah.
realized that the way people have been able consistently to pass things down since they got to this country and our community was through song, right? They didn't know how to read and write a lot of the time.
Hmm.
And if they did, they couldn't speak openly or else they would have been killed for it.
Right.
So I went and started reading through these old books of spirituals and things and didn't really find what I wanted there. I found something that was good, but it wasn't for me in
Hmm.
that moment.
Hmm.
And it sort of led me to read more about what was happening about work songs, all of that, and about the fiddle and the banjo. And when I got to college, I met the professor who would become my advisor, Lydia Hammersley, who gave me my first couple banjo lessons and sort of, I think my second semester in college, she was like, you need to be in my senior seminar at American Folk Revivals, and like, signed me into this class that was like way above my level. Because she didn't know when she was going to teach it again. She was like, you need to be in here. Um, and she really did so much to like help me create the course of study that I did, help me focus on that. My other professor, Doc Woods, was a really important advisor as well. Oversaw the research project that culminated in my first EP, reparations. So all of the groundwork was laid while I was at school, right? I got grants to pay for my first like fiddle camps and stuff. Um, I did my first field research as part of my program there. Yeah, it was a really good place as far as laying the groundwork for what
Foundations.
was to come.
Yeah. Foundational work. And here you are taking that experience and like you're creating it for others now because I know you teach, and I know that you have not censored the lesson, as it were. And I think it's very important for people to hear a younger voice telling it as it is. What is it like playing our music for audiences that might not recognize your face there?
Hmm. I think it depends. I think it's kind of tiring a lot of the time. Not in that people are usually rude to me. You just have to have a lot of the same conversations over and over, and it feels
Mm,
like you're constantly teaching the 101 class. Um, and I think every artist kind of goes through that fatigue, right? Because you put out one album and you wind up talking about everything on it for the next like 2 years until you put out the next. Like it's gonna be tiring. No one
mhm.
likes talking about the same thing for that long. Um, but I think in this specific context, like it is irritating when I go play a show and then, I'm at the merch table afterward trying to sell my CDs and like three old white dudes want to come up to me and tell me about the documentary they just watched about Howlin' Wolf. And I'm like, nothing I just did has anything to do with Howlin' Wolf. Like, yeah, yes, he also plays black music. Cool. Like, I'm not trying to knock Howlin' Wolf right now, but I'm
Certainly
just like, I'm
not.
like trying to do my job,
Right.
and
Right.
I think even sometimes from like a place of the best intentions, I wind up doing a lot to like facilitate people oversharing with me.
Mm.
I've had interviews before where people have been like, "Yeah, I was in a minstrel show as a kid," and I'm just like, "I don't know how to talk to you about that." Moving on.
Did you like the
There's,
show?
I'm just like, I wound up in a lot of situations where I feel like I am having to like humor a lot.
Mm.
Um, which is not to say that I don't think there's room for that. And I think people need to be able to ask the questions, just also when you're trying to like get a point across with your work and you feel like you're like having to get people to the point where they can hear it
Right.
as opposed to just doing what you're there to do.
Right.
It feels like a little bit of a double burden sometimes. But I don't know. I think it's an important role to fill. And I'm glad that the old time community is recognizing us in its history in
Hmm.
the way that I think many of us have wanted them to for a long time.
Definitely.
Um, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the role changes. I think of the limited amount of difficulty that I have had compared to the Carolina chocolate drops in their early days. You know, I am not
Hmm.
dealing with half of what Justin Robinson had to deal with,
Hmm.
or Rhiannon, or Dom.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm very grateful for them having like blazed the trail and
Yeah.
made it so much easier in so many ways. But it is tiring, and I do often think, you know, how can I get more Black people in the audience? You know, I feel like I'm trying to do this thing for us, and we're not here. Um, and I think I'm not the only Black person in the roots world who's had that issue. So it's a lot to think about.
That's that's interesting. One of the first times I heard you speak to an audience, you said, um, if there is a black face in the audience, I'm playing for them. And it was so powerful for me because I'd never had anyone say that to me or near me or in the room. And it's beautiful to see you creating a space not only for yourself but for a lot of other people. And I think you're right, it is powerful and important work, even if it is
Well, thank you.
tiring.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. um Well, your most recent album, Spider Tales, has been getting quite the attention. Number two on the Billboard Bluegrass chart, and you were featured in American Songwriter and The Guardian. Tell me what it feels like to go from finding your place, finding a focus, and then watching it blow up to an actual visible space.
Yeah. I think it happened really suddenly, and I think it's not helped by the pandemic feeling, right? That like I had this whole release tour planned, like I was gonna like hit the road with a full backing band for the
Right.
first time, like there were all these plans laid, and then like nothing happened, and the album just came out and got
Still
some
took
good
off.
coverage, thank goodness, and now it's just done. And of course, I'm excited to like get back on the road and tour it, but it feels like it happened just totally in a vacuum, um, which is really funny. You know, it's like if you got a promotion and you hadn't been at work in 6 months. It's like,
Right.
it's like what just
Oh, now.
happened? It's like I'm not complaining, but I also don't understand.
Right.
um,
Right.
and it's interesting. I think I have the tendency that I know a lot of my other musician friends do to finish one thing and immediately be thinking about the next one.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm definitely like mentally immersed in the next project at this point, which is
Awesome.
funny. It's happening so much faster because there's nothing else to occupy me in the meantime. Um, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And definitely in the next thing I'm working on, which shouldn't speak in great detail about, but which you've heard a little bit of,
I
I'm
know.
like pushing the envelope in a much stronger way. In that I think Spider Tales was really about like reuniting these very old sounds from
Hmm.
the Black community um, into something that was recognizable to
Hmm.
all of those pieces of the tradition. And this next one is much less strict as far as timeline. So I feel like I'm now able to plumb additional depths and to
Awesome.
learn more things and incorporate more sounds and more textures. And I think everybody has the internal battle of like, do I have enough confidence in this work? Like, will this succeed? And I think I'm constantly thinking like, am I pushing too hard right now? Like, is it too soon for this project to happen?
I don't
But
think
I
so.
just thank you. it's it's you know, it feels like, you know, I'm standing at the highest point I have so far, and I'm just will be interested to see where it goes from here.
I certainly am. And I'm not only excited for the music you're going to create for the rest of the evening, but for years to come. And I appreciate you being so open and candid with me for everyone to watch. But thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we will talk again soon.
Yes. Thanks for having me.